This episode is sponsored by Audible. Get a free audiobook of your choice that you get to keep with their free trial. You can learn more at lutherancartographer.com/audible. The Lutheran Cartographer, episode 72. Welcome to the Lutheran Cartographer, the podcast where we explore what it's like to be Lutheran in different places. I'm your host, Nicholas Weber. Today we are going to Dearborn, Michigan to talk to Pastor Tyler Walworth. He is the pastor of Our Savior Deaf Lutheran Church and the associate pastor of Emmanuel Lutheran Church. Pastor Walworth, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Help orient us geographically. We're in Michigan. Where are we?
So in Michigan, you have the hand thing. So you got to look at the thumb's got to be towards you. The thumb is its own area. So we're in the palm, on the lower left-hand side of your palm, if you were to use your palm. But right outside of Detroit, Dearborn is about, 10 minutes from downtown Detroit. 10 minutes. Now we're 10 minutes west of downtown Detroit. So Detroit is still east of us. And so that's the Emmanuel, and then Beverly Hills, which is the other church I serve, is about 30 minutes north of Detroit. So we're sort of in the metro Detroit area.
I see. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you ended up there.
So it's been an interesting process. So I'm about 6 years out now of seminary. I've been in the office for 6 years. When I first got out, I was a missionary, and I was serving in New York, but I was remote. So I would come to Long Island and do some work there with Milneck, which was a deaf organization. And so my main work was with the deaf community. And then later on, I took a call to Redeemer, which is in Birmingham, Michigan, and Our Savior. So Our Savior is sort of the common thread here. They're the deaf church. And so after I took that call, I moved to Royal Oak. So I was there. I was in Fenton, which was a little further west. And then I've moved east to Royal Oak, and now I've moved to Dearborn. So I'm slowly getting closer to Detroit. But I was in Redeemer for 2 years, serving the deaf and Redeemer as a hearing church, and now I'm doing that again, only as soon to be the sole pastor, but right now the associate at Emmanuel in Dearborn and Our Savior Deaf.
I see. Tell us a little bit more about deaf ministry. How did you come into that, and what does it involve, and how does it look any different, or does it look any different from regular parish ministry?
Sure. It was sort of an accident. Pastor Stephen Schumacher, who is now serving in Ghana, Africa, he was, at the time I was at seminary, he was the main on-campus professor. And he sort of got me interested. I got to seminary with no ambition of doing that kind of mission work. I just wanted to be a pastor, normal parish pastor. I liked languages, but whatever. And then he said, well, why don't you come to this class? And so I went to the deaf ministry class, which it's first started again in Fort Wayne Seminary during my time there. And so after that, they put me in a vicarage, and I was serving Reese, Michigan, Trinity and Reese. And then I was also serving a congregation called Christ the King in Flint, and they were deaf. And so it was sort of a baptism by fire. But yeah, as for it being the same as hearing, the strange part about it is no one is, deaf parents don't have deaf children. They might, but most of the time that's not the case. About 98% of the time it's hearing parents with deaf children. And deafness could be caused by sickness, or it could be caused by some medication that was taken and unaware, but it affected the child before birth. Could be caused simply by genetics, but it's unpredictable. And so the deaf community is sort of all over the place. And within the deaf community then, if you have, again, deafness doesn't mean you can't hear anything, but it means you cannot hear enough audio. Your mind can't interpret enough audio conversation to speak. And again, that would be to have a conversation. And so, because of that, deafness is sort of a range, and not everyone who's deaf knows sign language. And so, this is so in the community, it's just sort of this. There's deafness, and then there's those who are in the deaf community, which is bonded by American Sign Language, and that's sort of the even more narrow part where I'm dealing with. So I deal with the deaf community that knows sign language.
I see. Tell us a little bit more about the area of Michigan you're in. What would you say are some of the best parts about the area?
Oh, well, I'm not a native Michigander. I'm from Kansas City, Missouri, and even more narrowly, I'm from Kearney, Missouri, so sort of outside of Kansas City. Growing up there and now moving here, Michiganders love their state. Oh my goodness. I mean, there is like a state pride that now I know this because my wife is a Michigander. So, I have an in-depth knowledge. But Michigan is a beautiful place. They do have the Great Lakes, which they will boast about until they can no longer boast. So, it's a peninsula, totally surrounded by the Great Lakes. And so any way you go in the state, you're sort of running into a lake. There's fishing, there's outdoors. The one thing that the one distinction about Michigan is there's the UP, and then there's the trolls, those who live in the peninsula. So the UP is the Upper Peninsula, the part that's sort of connected to Wisconsin and all that, and the Lower Peninsula is those who are under the bridge. That's why they're called trolls, because the Mackinac
Okay.
Sea. Yeah, so we're under the bridge. Again, this is a Michigander thing. I don't, so I'm coming in as a third party. But yeah, so that's the main distinction. Everyone goes up north here, so that's a thing. Is there's a great migration every weekend to go up north, and that may be the UP, or really it may be anywhere outside of this Metro Detroit area. So the bulk of the population seems to be focused in the southeastern end, which is sort of where Detroit is, and radiates from there. Everywhere else is sort of trees and beauty. So
That makes sense. Let's talk a little bit more about Detroit and some of the challenges about being there. A lot of people hear Detroit and they think of urban decay. Is that really
right.
the case? And how far out from Detroit do you have to get in order to get to nicer places?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of movement in Detroit now to make it nicer. I mean, it's still true. You can still get houses there for $1,000 or nothing. The city is still working on building up that area, but again, that area is very, very, very small. Like I said, my house now is like 10 minutes outside of downtown Detroit. And there's no, if you came to my neighborhood, you wouldn't be like, whoa, watch out for the gangs and stuff. So yeah, I wouldn't say that the Detroit problem it doesn't continue to radiate out outside of a sort of a core in Detroit, and it's a sad situation there. But it's left the communities around it. While they're impacted, I wouldn't say they're totally desolate.
Okay, that makes sense. Tell us a little bit more about the area that you're in. What's it like being in Dearborn as opposed to, say, closer in the city or further away?
Yeah, well, it's been interesting because I've sort of started on like a western edge. So if you know of Ann Arbor, sort of Concordia University, Ann Arbor, so that's like the beginning of the beauty side. So once you get past Ann Arbor, going west in Michigan, it's all trees and this lots of acreage and all this. East of Ann Arbor is like you're getting more into Metro Detroit, the city. So starting in Fenton, which was like right on 23, which runs through Ann Arbor, I went to Royal Oak, and even that area is still. I mean, the houses are still. I only know this because I recently bought a house, but they're like $100,000 more dollars than going a little bit further east. So just to give you the monetary gap, but also the community-wise, I haven't noticed a huge difference. Roanoke is a nice little community. That was close to Redeemer where I used to serve. Now moving to Dearborn, again, I haven't really, I mean, I haven't been there. I've been there for like 2 seconds, but I haven't really experienced a crazy shift in how people are living. What the expectations are. It's a little busier in Dearborn than it is in Royal Oak. So.
Okay. Tell us a little bit more about the cultural contrasts that you've noticed. You mentioned that you're from Kansas City, Missouri. What would you say are some of the differences? You've mentioned like coming out as kind of an outsider and how much Michiganders really love Michigan. What else have you noticed in terms of cultural differences or ways of living differently?
Let's see. I would say, again, Missouri. They always say the South is slower, but it's sort of. I've experienced that sort of true. There's a busyness being in Michigan that is different. Being from Missouri, again, I was northern Missouri, so I don't have a drawl or anything like that. But we did things a little bit slower. The highways aren't as packed. The expectations are that you're not constantly doing stuff. But for Michiganders, I've noticed that they have to go somewhere every weekend. Again, the highways are packed. Right. If you try to go somewhere on a Friday going north on any highway in Michigan, you're going to be in a traffic jam. Yeah, that's just this cultural reality I've not really experienced in the same way in Missouri. Um, so within the state, they're very much into their state sports as well. So there's a Michigan State and Michigan University, and it is this die hard reality for people in Michigan. And so it's sort of cool to see. It's a friendly camaraderie, and it's a fun thing for the state. Um, so that's the state culture. I would say culturally here now, again, Dearborn is the main distinction is as probably most people have heard is that the Middle Eastern population here is very, very large. And so Islam is sort of number two here, if not almost number one based on the population. So
Interesting. Let's take a moment for a word from our sponsor. Folks, if you like podcasts, you will enjoy Audible. It's a service that gives you an audiobook to listen to each month of your choice from a large library. And they want to get you started with a free trial offer that includes an audiobook that you get to keep. So go to lutherancartographer.com/audible to get your free audiobook and start your free trial today. If you're not sure what book to check out, I recommend taking a look at Pastor Jonathan Fisk's Broken: 7 Christian Rules That Every Christian Should Break as Often as Possible. This was recently released on Audible. I'm very excited about it. In the book, Pastor Fisk goes through the classic pitfalls of moralism, mysticism, and rationalism, as well as several others. Check it out at lutherancartographer.com/audible. Let's get back to our guest. Well, let's go on then and talk about what it's like to be Lutheran there. What's it like being in a place that was, predominantly or at least nominally Christian, and now you've got this big influence of Islam coming in?
Yeah, it's being where we are. So Dearborn is sort of I'm learning more about it as people sort of discuss it with me, and where the people are here. But apparently, it actually used to be two different sort of cities itself, and there was, and people will say just sort of off the cuff, Westbourne and Eastbourne. So I said, oh, okay. There's even like whole marketplaces called. There's one called Westbourne Market. Oh, okay. Now I'm understanding. But yeah. So the concentration then of the Middle Eastern population seems to be on the east of Dearborn. There's a freeway that runs through Dearborn called Southfield, or 39 Highway, and it sort of splits Dearborn into two. And so Eastbourne is on the east side of that. I live in Eastbourne. It's just on the other side of 39. And then there's Westbourne. And I think that's sort of culturally some of the distinction too. So you get a lot more Arabic speaking and Arabic signs on the east side as opposed to the west. But again, I'm just sort of getting a taste of that. So Lutheranism, though, we still have quite a few Lutheran churches around, and lots of them with schools still. So it's a good thing. There's lots of availability. Our school is small, but the Catholic presence here is also pretty large too. So
I see. Talk a little bit more about the general culture of the town. Would you say has that kind of Christian ethos? Is it more secularized? How does the majority Catholic part come in? Say a little bit more about that.
Okay. So what I've noticed so far, again, being sort of a more outsider, Royal Oak was very much secular, and it's a very because of the influx of youth. So there's a lot of youth that were at Royal Oak. It was very much a progressive town in the political sense. So you had a lot of Democrat agenda there, which again, not that that's necessarily good or evil, but that's just the way it was. So they all the signage there reflected a Democrat tendency. And in this area, I would say it's sort of a mix of secular and Islam. Those are really the main things I've seen so far. Is on the west side. So the downtown area is sort of where the church is at, and that's sort of how I've seen it as sort of a mix of everything. So you have Emmanuel, which is right off of the main Michigan Avenue Road, and then you have Sacred Heart, which is the Catholic church on the corner, and then you have a Presbyterian church right across the way, and then there's the downtown, and overall the flavor seems to be more Middle Eastern, just in general. And so it's a unique aspect of it. But you also have your typical things here too. Again, that's more based on the restaurants and things. But for instance, Ramadan is being celebrated, and so that's been I've never even really taken note before, but now it's on every sign and every billboard and every restaurant. So I would say it's secular mainly, but also with a pretty heavy dose of Islam.
I see. How do you begin to do ministry with that, or does it really affect your ministry at all because you're, doing parish work, not mission work?
Yeah, I don't know that I would draw the line too strictly between the two. I definitely think our parish. It's great because most of the people are from Dearborn. Of course, mainly Westbourne, but there are people from Eastbourne too that attend our church. Our church is located in Westbourne, so it makes sense that most people are from this area. But I would say about 80% of the people here, are from this area, and so they reflect the needs of the area as well. So it's been good to work with them, and as I'm working with them, I'm seeing more and more of the needs of the area. Whether they be, that we need to reach out to the Islamic community or try to reach more Middle Eastern group. We don't have that many. I don't know that we have anyone right now who's, from the Middle East in our congregation. So I think that's an area of growth for us. It's right across the road, and my dream goal would be to learn Arabic, right, and just start an Arabic service. But that's of course down the road. So,
yeah, absolutely, that does sound like a really cool goal. Let's go on and talk a little bit about Beverly Hills. I don't want to give them the short shrift. Is
Oh,
there
that's
anything
fine.
that we need to say about there? We've mostly talked about Dearborn so far.
Oh, sure. Well, they are going to diversity. They're much less diverse, and again, I wouldn't say they. I shouldn't say less diverse. Let me put it this way: they are much more different parts of the world diverse. So in that area, because of the car industry and because of some of the affluence in the area, it really draws people from all over the world, not just only the Middle East. You have Middle Eastern people there, but there are all over Eastern Europe. It's quite astonishing how many people are from many people groups are there. Even there's a lot of Asian influence there too, and we actually had a group at Redeemer who was it's called I'm going to forget the name of it now, but it was a group of ladies who they were wives of businessmen, and their point was to create a friendly place for different cultures. And so we had, I think they said they had like 100 different languages represented or something like that. It was crazy. So we hosted them just as a meal, right? It wasn't really a ministry event, but more just a meal. And they were all there, and they were all from the area. That was the crazy part. And so yeah, it was, and of course I knew sign language, so I sort of added to their languages. But yeah, so that area is much more affluent, but also they the community I think is um, probably leaning more just generic Christian. And although there are 2, 3 Lutheran churches just in the Birmingham area, so there is a marked Lutheran presence there too.
I see. Let's talk what it's like to raise a family there.
It's sort of uh, the typical 1950s family, right? I mean, it's the neighborhoods are all nice, and so you feel pretty comfortable. Even where we move now in Dearborn, we've been able to raise our kids with relative little interference, no big issues, and we've had access to Lutheran schools. I mean, there's so many Lutheran schools around us, so we really haven't had to worry too much about the public school system, which is a whole nother story. But yeah, so for raising a family, it's a great place to raise a family. I think you have Lutheran options all over the place, and Lutheran churches all over the place. And that's another weird part about Michigan is they're in this area they're so heavily Lutheran in the sense that there's so many schools. I mean, they have 4 high school. Well, they used to have 4 high schools, Lutheran high schools.
Wow.
When we grew up in Kansas City, we had one Lutheran high school, and we had when I was going, it was like 100 kids for the entire Kansas City metro area. I mean, this was so the amount of Lutherans around here is much greater.
Let's now turn to current events. Michigan has been in the news quite a bit in terms of the number of coronavirus restrictions. How's it been for you and your congregation? Is it getting better? Is it still pretty much the same?
Yeah. We had to talk about the pandemic. No, it's such a strange thing. It's I hear of it often, but the way it's in the news, it's such there is no reflection of what's in the news versus what's actually happening. We're not all running around the streets. I think I heard someone say that we had like triages out in the parking lots or something, and like they converted something in downtown Detroit into this crazy hospital, which never got used, by the way.
That's a common theme across the U.S. that happened here in Seattle, too.
Yeah. So again, and God be praised that we had such a great response of people who wanted to do the right thing, and healthcare workers willing to help. So that's a wonderful thing. But restriction-wise, it's been really hard on the businesses. Coming out of Royal Oak, I think at least just on my anecdotal looking around, at least 5 businesses had closed by the time that we were 6 months into this coronavirus thing. And again, downtown Royal Oak, there's a lot of young people that go out all the time. And so, to start a business where I look was sort of like an obvious thing. And now it's, they're closing all over. I think it's clearly still impacting our congregation, how it's impacted us. We are, so how we've responded, and I know churches all over do this differently, but we've responded as, they started off, this is Dearborn, but they started off as sort of, we closed for a while and then we reopened, sort of typical of the area. And then when we reopened, we did a mask optional. And then eventually we did, now this last Easter, we took off our COVID restrictions for our main services. So in what we were doing at that time, because we were already mask optional, was we were doing the 6 feet spacing and other things. And again, we wouldn't encourage people to say, well, it doesn't matter anymore, coronavirus doesn't exist. But our stance has more been that we are a family, and so we treat each other like a family. So we have tried to address the needs of those who would like to see some more implementation of COVID restrictions. So we do have one service on Saturday today at 4:00 as a mask only service. And so people who come to that, they're asked to wear a mask to that service. That's sort of been our response to the surrounding restrictions and the surrounding environment, to help people who may feel vulnerable and want a place to go, but still want to come here. And so, we've provided that 4:00 service for them.
I see. Let's talk about what there is to do, things to see, places to eat. If you had a friend coming into town, where would you say you got to go here?
Oh, well, there's Buddy's Pizza. I don't know if you've ever, been in the Detroit area, but Buddy's Pizza is like their claim to fame. And it's right on Michigan Avenue here. I don't know that that's the original. I was told the original is like somewhere in downtown Detroit, but this is like the big one on Michigan Avenue. And so that's sort of out to eat wise. There's Buddy's Pizza. There's amazing Middle Eastern food, of course. We're just sort of touching the surface of some of those things. And really the amazing thing is there's so many in this little area. Cultural places you can go. I mean, there's like great Polish places and great, German places, of course. And so you have all these great little places around here. So going out to eat is a dream. And you could go pretty much to any region of the world you want to go. As for stuff to do, there is so right on Michigan Avenue here, just like 5 minutes from the church, is the Henry Ford Museum. And so this is, this massive structure that Henry Ford made. There's also Greenfield Village. And so Henry Ford, back in when he was alive, made this whole layout, made this museum, stuffed it full of amazing things of mechanical wonder. And then in Greenfield Village, he brought these houses. I think they have, see, now I should have researched my Greenfield Village, but they brought these houses of those who were sort of the technological giants of the time, and they put them all there. And so you can go into these places that are very old, and they're reconstructed. They actually took them down and put them back up in this Greenfield Village. And so you get to walk around, and so it's sort of like a living history. And of course, you get to ride around in Model Ts. So that's the direct area, but downtown Detroit now has been built up. You have the Tigers are down there. The Pistons have a new arena. It's called Little Caesars Arena, and so there, you pretty much have every major sport that you could go to just in this little, Metro Detroit area. So there's an abundance of things to do, which again is great.
Absolutely. As we start to close out the podcast, Pastor Walworth, I want to make sure to give you the opportunity to point our listeners where you'd like. Your church's website, places to follow you online. Where would you like to point our listeners?
Sure. So we do live stream our services, and that's if you go to Emmanuel Lutheran Dearborn, that's our website. And let me I'm going to double check the how that goes. Emmanuel Lutheran Dearborn. So it's actually Emmanuel Dearborn, Emmanuel Dearborn.org. So that's sort of the main hub of where we post everything there, all our schedules, all our YouTube stuff. So I would say if you wanted a flavor of what Emmanuel's like, you could go there and find everything you need.
Great. And then our Savior?
Our Savior, we also have a website, and I post there also some great devotions weekly based on the historic lectionary, and you can find all the information you need there. It's OSLCD, so Our Savior Lutheran Church of the Deaf, OSLCD.org. And that's where, again, sort of the main hub. Find out about us, look at what we teach and how we teach. That's where you could find that.
Great. Dear listener, you can find links to all that stuff that Pastor Walworth just mentioned at the show notes page. It'll be at lutherancartographer.com/72. Pastor Walworth, thank you so much for your time today. What are your parting thoughts for our listeners?
If you're in the area or anywhere in the Metro Detroit area, feel free to come by. We would love to see you here. This is where Lutheranism thrives at Emmanuel. We love our liturgy, we love our hymns, but we also love our visitors too. So if you're in the area and you're Lutheran, or if you're in the area and you're not Lutheran, you're exploring, please come by. We'd love to talk to you.
Fantastic. Thank you again. God's peace.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Lutheran Cartographer. For more about the things that we talked about today, check out that show notes page. That'll be at lutherancartographer.com/72. I encourage you to follow the show on iTunes or on Stitcher if you aren't already, so you don't miss an episode. And until next time, I'm Nicholas Weber. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you soon.